A note before we begin. This episode contains details of violent crimes.
Someone had to take over when we lost Mum, so that was always going to be me. But Janine's got no voice in this, so someone has to speak for her. What they put her through, they should never, ever be out of jail, as far as I'm concerned.
David Balding was just 10 years old when his sister Janine was abducted from a Sydney train station by a group of young men. One was just 14 years old. They brutally assaulted her over hours and eventually threw her into a dam to drown.
The semi-naked body of Janine Balding was found in a shallow dam early Saturday morning.
Now, 40 years later, Janine's surviving relatives face a sinister new fight for justice. One of the men convicted of her slaying will be released into the community with support from the taxpayer-funded National Disability Insurance Scheme.
David is a businessman in Wagga Wagga, so this is the town where Janine grew up. Her parents were there until their deaths in recent years. David is a really strong advocate for Janine. So every time there's a movement in the case or one of the offenders is applying for some sort of leniency, David is always there to say, you know, what about Janine? What about what happened? You know, we know what happened. We can't forget this.
Christine Midap is an associate editor with The Australian. She broke this story and interviewed David Balding.
You can't keep people in jail forever unless there are exceptional circumstances. So the state of New South Wales actually applied for the extended supervision order. It's not always easy to get one of those, so they have kept him in jail beyond his sentence since 2019 anyway, on a continuing detention order. So they've already argued twice before the Supreme Court that he's too dangerous to release. Now, notwithstanding the fact that he appears still too dangerous to be released, the state of New South Wales on this occasion applied for a supervision order. So this is a very strict supervision that he will have out in the community.
Wayne Wilmot was just 15 when he conspired with 4 other teenagers and 1 adult to kidnap Janine. The court found he didn't participate in her rape or murder, but he was held liable for the assault because of his involvement. Experts have diagnosed him with psychopathic traits and warned that he poses a significant risk of reoffending if he's freed. And yet, Wilmot will get 8 hours of help with day-to-day activities every week and double that in support for economic and community participation. He'll also have taxpayer-funded access to healthcare and behavioural experts. He'll be subject to a strict curfew and will be required to wear an electronic ankle monitor. The NDIS is staffed by people who don't earn a lot of money. A lot of them are immigrants. These are real human beings who are going to have to go and help this man, presumably in his home. What fears have been raised about their safety?
Well, I think he would be in some sort of supported group home. But this is a perpetrator who forensic psychologists have consistently found has no insight, no remorse. So if I was a female support worker, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near this man. And to be honest, if I was a male, I wouldn't either. Now, look, I'm sure there are supports, maybe this is delivered over the phone or something, but there would need to be great care taken, I think, with dealing with this guy.
The fear for workers' safety is shared by David Balding.
Yeah, I don't know how these ankle monitors and stuff like that work, but I'd be very concerned.
And how do you feel about the fact that NDIS support is going towards him to help him reintegrate to the community?
Oh, I reckon it'd be better to spend somewhere else.
Wayne Wilmot has spent his entire adult life in prison, and several attempts have been made over the years to rehabilitate him.
He doesn't show any remorse for anything. He is who he is, and that's who he's going to be, I think.
Wilmot served just 8 years in prison for his part in Janine Balding's death. Over the 20 months that followed, while on parole, he embarked on what can only be described as a reign of terror. It's believed he attacked at least 8 victims, including what appear to be completely random assaults on women who had never met before, with one railway station employee subjected to a horrific attack. He threatened another woman with a knife, but she managed to flee. Wilmot was sent back to prison for those crimes, where he's been treated as a high-security prisoner. His sentence was officially up in 2019, but he was kept behind bars under what's known as a continued detention order. The judge who granted that order said Wilmot's long rap sheet and his pattern of reoffending meant setting him free was simply too risky. That order was extended in 2021. One forensic psychologist says it's highly likely Wilmot will reoffend, and if that happens, the attack would most likely involve a penetrative sexual attack upon a young woman previously unknown to him. They added that any offence would probably be impulsive, opportunistic, and target a vulnerable woman. Wilmot has himself admitted he has a problem with women, and he believes they're deserving of the violence inflicted upon them. NDIS Minister Bill Shorten told Christine the program has a responsibility to help disabled people, even ex-cons.
What's interesting in this case, though, is that looking through all of the judgments, I can't really see that Wayne Wilmot has a mental disorder as such beyond pathological traits, and he has a severe personality disorder. So that probably does qualify him, but look, as David Balding said, he can think of people who are a lot more worthy to get this help. Now, Bill Shorten's office has indicated they are looking at the NDIS funding aspect of his release. There's a concern really that prisoners who are going into the parole system, so that's the state system, should be supported by the state system and not the NDIS system. So there's a concern that I suppose the NDIS is being used as a dumping ground. So I think there'll be some consideration of whether he should have qualified for NDIS support.
Coming up, the DNA twist that could see another of Janine's killers released. Thanks for listening to The Front, and don't forget, we'd love you to subscribe to The Australian, where our audience is always the first to know, with breaking news alerts, newsletters and the best journalism 24/7. Check us out at theaustralian.com.au, and we'll be back after this break. Janine Balding was just 1 month off her 21st birthday when she died. She planned to get married less than 6 months later, in March of 1989. She was working as a bank teller at what was then known as the State Bank of New South Wales, in a branch on George Street in the middle of Sydney. It was complete happenstance that Janine was the victim of this most awful of crimes, something that has haunted New South Wales over 5 decades. She had just arrived by train at Sutherland Station in Sydney's south after a busy day at the bank. She was walking to her car when the group of young people, who were all homeless, approached her, pulling out a knife and forcing her into a car. A court would later hear one of the boys had earlier suggested to the others, "Why don't we get a Sheila and rape her?" They raped and abused her inside the car as they drove to Minchinbury in the city's west. Then one of them suggested killing her. The men gagged and hogtied her, dragged her along the ground and then threw her into a dam to drown. They stole her bank cards and her jewellery, but after bragging to other homeless kids about what they'd done, they were eventually caught. The 3 main perpetrators, Matthew Elliott, Bronson Blessington and Stephen Shorty Jamieson, were given life sentences plus 25 years and are still in prison. The girl, Carol Arrow, was given a 9-year sentence. Blessington, who was just 14 at the time of the crime, now holds scripture classes for other inmates and says he is deeply repentant for what he did. There's a lingering controversy about the identity of one of the killers. The man who's in jail, Stephen Shorty Jamieson, has always insisted he was not there. There's another man, Mark Wells, also known as Shorty, who was known to wear a bandana. And there's a campaign led by a lawyer named Peter Breen to have DNA testing performed on a bandana found at the scene of the crime to establish if the wrong man were convicted. David Balding insists the right Shorty is in jail.
It hasn't ended. It has not ended. We've got the right people. They're where they belong. There's no new evidence. It's all been looked at before. This wrong Shorty garbage. That's why the first trial was aborted. They investigated that, found nothing in it, found they had the right people. This former MP, Peter Breen, just can't seem to let this stuff go. He started on Blessing and wanted to get Blessing out because of his age, and then he's moved over to Shorty. And I think if he gets something done with Shorty, he'll move himself back over to the other two to try and get them out, I reckon.
And how do you think your mum would feel about the prospect of Wilmot being out?
Angry, very angry. She's seen him out before and seen what's happened. This took its toll on her life. It cut it short for sure.
Christine Middap is an associate editor with The Australian. Monday's the day for judgment in the epic Bruce Lehrmann defamation trial. You can get ready by reading all the analysis and reporting we've been publishing here at The Australian. And on Monday, follow the result live by subscribing at theaustralian.com.au.